Time Not Here, Chapter 16. Time passed as he relaxed into the comfortable bed. His whole body softened. He stared into the blackness created by the mask and reminded himself of the questions he had written down earlier that day. Who was Lathe? Why do I get so depressed? Why am I such a coward? How can I enjoy life? What is my life purpose? Who am I? He'd read in a blog article that Kimber is a lucid experience, where thoughts become clearer and easier to follow. He had hoped this lucidity would give him a chance to answer at least some of those questions, whether they were through hallucinations or not. The medicine began taking effect, with a gradual increase in the volume of his own internal monologue. The narrating voice in his mind grew louder and more clear. Rather than flitting from idea to idea, it was smooth, ordered, and tranquil. At first, he thought about the ceremony, the people he had just met, and what they might have thought of him. He felt the effects growing stronger. Then his mind went quiet. A strange sensation moved in his toes. It was like electricity, a warm and gentle fizzling spreading through his toes and into his feet. As the feeling dispersed through his legs, midriff, and beyond, he felt a deep relaxation spread across his body. Then he heard a loud and powerful voice echoing through his veins. "Hello, Daniel." This is it, he thought. It's working. He spoke a hello to the voice before realizing it was his own voice he was speaking to. A silence filled the air. Daniel was ready to start asking questions. Still unsure of whether any of this was going to work and eager to test it, he asked a question he already knew the answer to. What is the sun? The outline of a sphere faded into the darkness of his mask, flaming at the edges and gently filling in with a deep red-yellow glow. An incubator lamp, the voice spoke back to him. As a physicist, he had been trained to think of the sun as a big ball of burning gas, a result of gravity squashing the gas, forcing hydrogen atoms to fuse into helium, releasing huge amounts of light and heat in the process. It was a compelling description. It also said that the sun was just a random consequence of the laws of physics, a cosmic accident that just so happens to make life possible here on Earth, but that has no real agency, no purpose, no intention. But an incubator lamp, that's something with purpose. That brings warmth to a newborn baby, to help it survive the harsh conditions outside the safety of a womb. You wouldn't look at an incubator lamp and say, this is just the effect of electricity running through a thin wire producing heat and light as a result of energy transfers. Of course, Daniel thought. That's how it works. But that's not what it's for. What if the sun is the same? What if it's there for a reason? What if the reason was the same as the incubator lamp, to help us survive the harsh conditions outside the safety of some kind of cosmic womb here in our solar system? The Earth, perhaps. Our womb in the vast emptiness of space. Or maybe the womb is the nothingness before the Big Bang. Daniel thought about the Egyptians and their sun worship. What if they understood this idea more than modern scientists do? Sure, they didn't know about nuclear energy or atomic fusion, but they did appreciate how the sun itself was a source of life, and they deemed it worthy of respect and worship. He then wondered if all the other stars were there for the same reason, incubating life in their own unique way. Some succeeded, like ours. Many didn't. Our universe, with billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, it could all be a grand experiment of life, every possible combination of star size and planet distribution, trying to find the right mix to allow life to survive. We are on a planet in a solar system that has managed to form life, yet we seem to think that the sun is just an accident rather than a god, or at least one of many gods. He felt a wave of anxiety creep in. He didn't want to come here and think about God. He doesn't believe in God, or any of the woo-woo nonsense of the spiritual self-help industry. He doesn't need God to explain the sun. But the idea of the incubator lamp, that was worth remembering. How do I remember this? There was going to be 15 to 20 hours of this, with dozens of individual future doses of the powdered kimber bark. Surely a lot of insights were about to come his way. The last thing he wanted to do was forget it all. A memory palace, he decided. He'd heard of them, one of those big mental maps you can use to boost your memory, like magicians use to memorize a deck of cards, or Plato when remembering his speeches. Daniel had never created a memory palace before and didn't know how. He decided instead that he'd simply put a virtual flag in ideas as they happened, and then just remember the flags in order. Then he'd go through 1, 2, 3, 4, and remember each idea by remembering the flag that it's on. Simple association. So what to put on this flag, he wondered. Maybe a sun, maybe an incubator lamp. As he zeroed in on an image containing the two of them, he smiled, satisfied with himself, and thought, good, that idea is safely stored with flag number 1. Let's keep going. He asked a few more questions and received a few more answers. By about the 4th or 5th flag, he started to notice something. My obsession with how to remember this is stopping me from learning this. He'd spent at least half of the last hour thinking about how he was going to remember each of the insights that came, rather than actually having more insights. He'd even caught himself imagining being back home, talking to Sam, explaining at length how the sun was actually an incubator lamp and the galaxy is one big petri dish for life. He was wasting this experience, this expensive once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, imagining how he would describe a handful of his insights to someone else in the future, maybe, instead of being in it here, now. He remembered his card from earlier and its perplexing reference to the here and now. Who cares how you'll describe it? Sooner or later, you're going to have to trust that you'll know what to say when the time comes. That you will remember. With the last part of that thought, he felt close to something. Something important. You fucking moron, his mind interrupted. This is what you always do. You've been doing this your whole life. A torrent of thought emerged in the background, then spilled onto his consciousness all at once, as if every aspect of his personality was there, simultaneously, just like he'd theorized to Dmitri. Voices jostling for position at the front of a queue, some bringing comfort, some bringing pain, each fighting to be heard. You're an ugly person. Who would want you? You're kind-hearted. You just want to help others. You're evil. You think evil thoughts like this, and you deserve to die. No one will ever love you. Look how fast you're breathing, you idiot. Everyone thinks you're insane. You think you're so interesting. You're not. You're worthless. Shouting in unison, a chattering crowd of jurors and judges analyzing his every move and thought. The voices grew louder. The hatred in their content grew more insidious. Every insecurity, every fear, all shouting at once, filling his head with insufferable chatter. He felt a rumbling in his belly, the kind of rumbling you don't ignore. He sat up, took the mask off, and clambered for the bucket. He opened his mouth. With zero effort, Daniel's stomach poured forth a thick green and stench-full bile that burned his lips on the way out and splashed into the bucket below. It stopped, then started again as effortless as before. When it had all been brought up, after a few minutes of holding his mouth open and letting it all go, he put the bucket down, placed the mask over his eyes, and lay back. To silence. No thoughts, no fears, no insecurities, no self-congratulating confidence, no doubts, just nothing. All those voices were gone. His attention was on only one thing: his body. He could hear his breath, loud and clear, feeling his ribs and diaphragm expand with each inhale, and the simple letting go of muscles that brought the exhale. He felt the weight of his body on the bed and the softness of the sheets on his skin. His heart rate was slow, deep, and regular. His mouth relaxed, his arms free from the tension that usually infests them. As he lay in stillness, he stared into the darkness and felt the most intense peace he had ever felt. Like he had purged himself of all those thoughts, good and bad, concentrating them into his belly and vomiting them up altogether. All that was left was silence. After what seemed like a few more seconds of stillness, he took off the mask and sat up to take some water. Out the window, the sun was rising, and the birdsong signaled the dawn. Sunrise. His second dose must have been at about 10 or 11 p.m., no later, and it was only half an hour after that dose when he had vomited. How is it now sunrise? He lay back. The stillness must have lasted for at least 5 hours, yet it felt like just a few seconds. Those hours could have been spent worrying about all the things wrong in his life, but they weren't. They were just spent in peace, enjoying the feeling of being a living, breathing organism with pulse and muscle and bone and heart. He turned his head and saw that his dish had been refilled with 4 brown pill capsules. Well, he thought, now that I've cleared out all of that rubbish, let's see what happens next. He took all 4 pills and put the mask back on. Got to take a little break for some water. There's heavy shit in this book. This is not an easy read. It's gonna tug at you. As the next wave of Kimber's effects came over him, he felt the electricity return and spread once again through his body. A series of dreamlike visions emerged, each bringing insights, answering questions asked and questions he hadn't thought to ask. Free from the distraction of trying to think about how to remember each insight, he was now able to move swiftly from vision to vision, without the self-critical pit stops for memory flags and rehearsing how he'd describe it all someday. The first was a memory. He saw himself as a 10-year-old boy on the first day of school after returning to the UK from Saudi Arabia. He looked down at the young Daniel, tanned and blonde from a half-decade living in the Middle East, arms folded across his lap and wearily scanning the room at the unusual people scattered around the classroom. It was a math class, and the teacher had already introduced Daniel to the room as their new student from Saudi Arabia. When asked to tell the class a few words about life in the Middle East, he had struggled to hide the pain he felt knowing that he was never going home. We would go racing up and down sand dunes a lot and ride camels sometimes. Mostly it was really hot and I don't know, it's cool there. The vision's point of view slowly moved down and into the back of the little boy's head, shifting to a first-person experience. "Why do you have an American accent?" the teacher asked abruptly. "You're English, right? And you lived in Arabia, so why do you sound like you're from California?" He felt cold, scared, and alone. He wanted his mum and dad to hug him and tell him it would be okay. He looked at the teacher and hated him for making him stand up in front of everyone, on his first day, barely 2 weeks into his time in this strange country. The other children laughed at the teacher's question. He didn't know he had an accent. He just wanted to go home. "Can I go to the bathroom, please?" he almost whispered, fully expecting that he might start crying at any moment. "The bathroom?" the teacher laughed. "Sure, have a nice bath." The room erupted in laughter as the kids joined in. "Have a nice bath, Daniel." He ran out of the room and cried his way all the way to the toilets. As he cried, he thought how weird he was to those kids. How they had no idea what his life had been, with all the sand and classy hotels, beaches, ice hockey tournaments, Cub Scouting trips and adventures in the desert. Their country was cold and wet and crowded, with tiny little houses and strange obsessions with football and something called Pokemon. He would never feel normal with these people. He just wanted to go home. The observer pulled up and out of his first-person view to see the small tanned boy crying alone in a toilet cubicle. From this view, he didn't feel the sadness. It was neutral, objective. The scene started to rewind. He watched the little boy in reverse, zooming back into the class and returning to the beginning of the vision. This time, disconnected from the little boy and watching as the third person, he saw a different scene unfold. He saw compassion in the teacher's eyes as he asked him to tell his story. He saw the curiosity in the other children's faces as they tried to figure out who he was and how he got there. He didn't see any of the hatred, judgment, or mockery that he had felt directed at him before. When the teacher asked about his accent, it was from a place of genuine interest. The tone in his voice and expression on his face was gentle and friendly. There had been a long pause after Daniel's awkward description of Saudi Arabia. The question about his accent was the teacher's attempt to lighten the mood. Daniel had not seen things clearly when he was the child, as if something inside that little boy's head was choosing to focus on the bad thoughts, to let self-criticism and judgment dominate over the objective truth of the moment that he's actually in, as he watched his child self run out of the room close to tears. He could see the teacher furrowing his brow, trying to understand what he had done to upset the poor boy. The man felt guilty for having embarrassed him, and he was confused. Why had Daniel been triggered by such a simple question? He watched the other children with playful eyes saying, "Have a nice bath," in an attempt to share a joke with the new kid, to help him settle in, to give him a taste of British humour, self-deprecating and droll. There was no malice there. They were just trying to deal with the novel situation in their own weird ways. And yet little Daniel was crying his eyes out in that bathroom, firmly convinced that everyone thought he was a loser. But he was choosing to feel like that. He had been interpreting the world through a lens that said, "I am not normal. Other people are judging me. I am broken." That lens distorted the moment to become something worth crying about, when he could have just laughed instead. But why? He wondered why such a small child would have such a negative mindset, why he couldn't just enjoy the first day of school and laugh along with the others. As he wondered, the vision shrank and faded into the distance, soon replaced by the next one after another. Onwards. Thank you for joining me. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, and I'll see you again momentarily for chapter 17, because I'm gonna bash out all of these videos in one day. I want to get to the end of this book before this evening is done, so when I actually get around to posting it, join me for chapter 17. All right. Love you loads. See you soon.